Scooter heads, Dagwood Streets here, and you are tuned in to another amazing episode of the Electric Scooter Podcast. Why amazing? Well, if you listen to the last episode, you know why. We have got Greg, Chief Technical Officer of Fluid Freeride, and we are bending his ear. Some of the things we're going to talk about in this episode are solid tires, braking, including drum brakes. He's going to address suspension systems, that's shock absorbers. We're going to talk about some specific models, two of which I own, the Fluid Freeride Horizon and the Apollo Explorer. We're also going to discuss Inokim and Mantis. They're kind of like cousins. One's the tough guy and one's the classy guy. Advantages of knobby tires, some of the differences between knobby tires and street tires, and some sound opinions, literally sound opinions. Hey, here's a hint. The knobby tires make noise, the street tires not so much. Also, we're going to discuss lighting. You're not going to want to miss this episode. Greg, the Chief Technical Officer of Fluid Freeride, opening new branches in Brooklyn, which is already open, and one in the Bay Area, San Francisco specifically. Of course, they're headquartered down in Little Haiti, which is, I think it's a part of Miami down there in that place they call Florida. We are at the Consumer Electronics Show, CES, in outrageous Las Vegas at the Convention Center. So you're going to hear people whizzing by on scooters and e-bikes, people chatting. It's all just part of the ambiance, a little way to maybe feel like you're there. Hey, wait, what is that? That's not the theme song to the Electric Scooter Podcast. It's true. I just felt like playing guitar today, so I plugged in and did something. Made a little music video. Go to the Dagwood Streets YouTube channel if you'd like to see an actual scooter video. Having a hard time finding music that's related to scooters, so rather than complain, I'm just making my own music about scooters. Riding my scooter, riding my scooter, riding my scooter, riding. Feeling it. I think you get the idea. The song does get better. There's an actual electric guitar solo later on. Oh, there's some guitar right there. In this episode, episode 56 of the Electric Scooter Podcast, we return to Fluid Freeride's Chief Technical Officer, Greg. We had a great conversation last time. Mainly, we got a lot of background about himself and the stores he's opening. And this time, we'd like to get a bit more specific and talk about models. Okay, so I know one of the things, Greg, that scooter heads want to hear when they're listening to a podcast is specific models. Can you tell me a few of the models that you carry and which ones you prefer or which ones are appropriate for certain types of riders with different use case scenarios?
Yeah, sure. So probably a little bit easier than model by model basis. I'll get more specific in a moment. We do carry, quite a few brands. Inokim, our own brands in the model of the City Rider and the Horizon, the Cabo with the the Wool series, and the Mantis, Mercane with the wide wheel and whatnot. Some of my favorite models, though, are definitely the Horizon, which is kind of our lightweight-ish commuter.
I call it the Toyota Corolla of scooters because
it's just solid and it's flexible, and when you need it to go, it's going to go. I have 2 Wolf Warriors, Go Tracks. I have a bunch of scooters, but when I'm just going to grab something and throw it in the trunk and head to the park or go with somebody, I'm telling you that Horizon it's a real go-to scooter.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, it just shines in so many different areas. Just ease of use, its weight, its power and performance in that realm. And as well from, on the other side of it, it's fairly easy to maintain. Solid rubber rear tire, drum brake. It kind of eliminates a lot of the maintenance woes you see on other scooters. And then, personally, being from New York City, seeing these things out in the streets, they can take a beating and a beating upon a beating. Like, it's pretty interesting to see these things hold up, when other scooters in the same category can suffer some significant failures.
People diss the drum brake because it's old technology. Toyota pickup trucks, until I think it was last year, had drum brakes in the rear. But there's a reason for them sticking around. They're great if you're riding in dust or water. And like you said, they're very maintenance free. They last forever. I don't diss the drum brake. I think that disc brake is definitely an upgrade, preferably hydraulic over cable. But the disc brake, solid rear wheel on the Horizon really makes sense, because the fact of it being a solid wheel is kind of compensated by the shock absorption.
Yeah, that definitely helps a lot. And thankfully the rear has the kind of greater shock absorption system of the two. It has these 2 struts that are able to, really...
Because you don't need it with a pneumatic wheel in the front. A pneumatic wheel has a lot of shock absorption properties already.
Yeah, which is lovely. So, that initial kind of entry into a bump or an obstacle gets soaked up initially by the pneumatics. And it does have sort of a... in the bicycle world, they call it a head shock system, but in kind of internal dampener within the steering axis. And, by the time it gets to the rear, you're just managing, kind of the rider's weight a little bit and the buck of the motor and everything coming up. But going to what you're saying, too, I'm actually a very big fan of drum brakes. I apologize. For that reason, I personally come from an environment where basically as soon as you buy some new vehicle, it has a very limited lifespan in terms of rust and road salt and grime and whatnot. And, having a shielded system like that really just eliminates so many different problems. It keeps the braking consistent. And, some people say, oh, brake fade, this and that. But you really have to examine what we're installing these things on. If the scooter's only capable of about 25 miles an hour, 30 max, that has a drum brake, you're going to be really hard-pressed to heat soak that to the point where you have glazing and brake fade and this and that.
And with a solid tire, I don't recommend slamming on the rear brake anyway, because you don't want to develop a flat spot on a solid tire.
Oh, yeah, that will give you a lovely brick in the washing machine feeling. So.
Right. Until you change it. I mean, a lot of people buy a solid tire because of the low maintenance. Well, you're going to have that wop, wop, wop feeling until you change tires, which is maintenance.
Yeah, generally I've seen it happen a couple times in the city where people come in to change their solid tires, usually due to, thankfully, an avoided accident. But at the expense of that tire, which now has, maybe half a centimeter of material removed, sliding downhill to avoid a car or such. But that is a funny aspect of the rubber tire, of the solid rubber tires, where pneumatic one, you can do the same thing, but it's not as pronounced, and the air volume kind of fills that flat spot in a little bit.
Yeah, and that also goes true for gripping the road. On a solid rear tire, or any solid tire is not going to handle sand and loose gravel and things like that as well. But I like that it's on the rear tire, because if your front tire skids out, you're in bad shape. But a rear tire, for some reason, is natural. People that do drifting or have ridden skateboards or ice surf, you're doing rooster tails, even water skiing, things like that. For some reason, human beings seem to feel natural skidding out the rear, but not the front.
Yeah, it's a funny conversation I was having with people while they were test riding here. And they were asking, like, oh, do you crash a lot or do you slide out a lot? And the funny thing about scooters, even in comparison to my experience with motorcycles and bicycles, is that they don't really have that tendency to want to wash out in that way. But if you get too rear brake happy, they're more than happy to swing the tail out. The best thing about them, though, is they do it in a very predictable manner,
right,
where they want to snap back to straight, and especially if you're coming to a stop. you have so much of the weight coming forward onto that front wheel that you can pretty easily get it back into shape, unless it's wet. And that actually happened to me the other day. I was in San Francisco. Somebody popped a U-turn in front of me from the parking lane in the rain with no headlights. And I was riding one of our scooters, and unfortunately, I did slide out a little bit. But it took a minute, and I was able to slow down significantly. I didn't hit the car, and thankfully evaded a much worse situation.
Did you fall to the ground?
I did, yeah. I have a nice black and blue to show for it on my hip.
That's part of it. I like skidding out the rear tire. It just looks fun and kind of dramatic. Your buddy's waiting for you, and you come up and you slide out a little bit. It just looks cool.
But this is also after, I mess around on scooters significantly, and I'm kind of notorious for that. So this is after dozens and dozens and dozens of time of me sliding around and, doing a half donut or whatever. So, if anything, it kind of reaffirmed my confidence. I was like, all right, these things are pretty darn stable because, say on a bike, there's been plenty of times when I was working as a courier where my front wheel washed out right on me because you have a more equal weight balance, which usually would be a great thing. But in that scenario, you slide out a front wheel on a bike, which is quite easy to do. You're going down rather quick.
You're going down, but since I do a lot of off-roads, actually, I'll tell you this, primarily, I would say 80% of my scooting is in the dirt and over rocks and stuff like that. I do go down, but if I were on a motorcycle or a bicycle, it's kind of hairy the way you're going to fall. But on a scooter, I'll tell you what happens to me 90% of the time. I just run. I end up trotting. And of course, I'm not going 90 miles an hour over dirt roads on a scooter. Around here, Vegas, a lot of rocks and stuff like that. I just kind of end up, the scooter goes down and I trot 3 or 4 feet. I come back, pick up my scooter, and keep going.
Yeah, and then even like little casual incidents that happen to us while we're giving test rides, or just people being unfamiliar with the scooter. Usually, it's just a hop off the scooter, aside, and a ha. Versus something with a bike that could be you folded up in the bike, or on a motorcycle, God forbid the bike falling on you and significantly injuring you. So that is where it becomes so much more manageable and so much more pleasurable to even maintain like some of our more unruly scooters that are very fast and very powerful, because it's manageable. The floor's right there, and you can hop right off. And worst case scenario, let the scooter go because it's not as important as you are.
The Electric Scooter Podcast. The only podcast scientifically proven to make you smarter, better looking, a better dancer, and extremely attractive. Don't argue with science.
So speaking of more powerful scooters, above the horizon, what would you say is next? Maybe the Mantis or?
Yeah, so probably between them, I would say we do have some newer models from Apollo. So one of them would be the Explorer. So coming from the horizon, the Explorer would basically be, I would say, a slightly more powerful, larger battery capacity version of that same kind of commuter class scooter. Then, skipping a couple miles, we could jump to the Mantis, which is in that kind of middleweight scooter of 30, 40 mile an hour top speed.
So the Explorer is kind of in between the Mantis. Mantis is sportier than the Explorer, right?
Definitely,
like you said, it's more of a commute. And I want to tell the listening scooter heads also that I do own the Apollo Explorer, and I do like it, and I recommend it. Like you said, as just a stand. It's got a nice big wide deck on it. It's reliable. It's easy to fold up. It's not too heavy that you don't want to travel with it. It kind of fits that little niche right there.
Yeah, definitely. And right there, that scooter kind of delineates, I would say probably like lower performance scooters from higher performance ones, because you have quite powerful single motor. And then, from there, you start seeing the scooters with dual motors, right? So like the Mantis or the OXO. And, those are, like I was saying, like 30 or 40 mile an hour scooters in that like 70-pound weight class. But they do have some pretty, powerful acceleration.
And you sell the Mantis and the Inokim, which I tell you, I always call Inokim at least the OXO, the Ducati of scooters, because I just love the design. And I saw one. They have them down in Ecuador recently. People were riding Inokims. So how would you compare the Mantis or the Mantis Pro to the Inokim?
Yeah, they're funny because they're almost, side by side. One could be mistaken of seeing them as twins in the class, right? But they do have some distinct differences, and I think it just comes down to design principle and intended use. The Mantis is definitely a performance to value proposition, but the Inokim, it falls out of that, and especially, its common kind of knock against is in the price range. But it's
slower acceleration too.
Exactly, but
and it's a thumb throttle, right?
Yes, yeah, it's a thumb throttle or like a paddle versus the finger or index kind of finger throttle. But it is a darn smooth, kind of very stability focused scooter for people who want exactly that, kind of like the Ducati Monster, but they have like kind of the average Joe commute, right? And the both of them together, they really shine, like I said, in the same class, but they just do different things for different people, and in a different aesthetic. The Mantis kind of has that very sleek, all black, kind of very zippy kind of aesthetic, but meanwhile the Inokim has a little more flair.
The Mantis is kind of a murdered out, sporty, right?
I would say so.
And the Inokim is kind of classy looking. And when you pull up to the cafe, and you got those colors popping, and especially one of the Inokims has a single-armed swing arm, doesn't it?
Yeah, so both the OX and the OXO utilize that single-sided design, which a little tidbit about that is it actually makes it extremely easy to change flat tires, even at home.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, if you have a good set of tire levers, you can get that tire changed in 5 minutes.
But why don't they come out with a model with tubeless tires?
That would be even nicer, right? Because then, one, it would alleviate some of the issues, but also, two, you could patch them instead of even having to remove it off the rim. You know what? I think, possibly being an Israeli company, maybe just considering worldwide access to probably tubes and, patches and whatnot. That would be my best guess. But it also might be just a manufacturing or engineering choice for those specific rims.
I definitely prefer tubeless because I don't like the idea of you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't even run over a piece of glass or a nail. It just developed because it pinched inside of the tire.
Yeah, especially as motors get more compact but yet more powerful, I have seen that a lot. Or either from the byproduct of tube with a little bit poor tolerance, rubbing on the inside of a tire, maybe with a little too much ribbing.
Right.
Totally makes a flat tire, a bunch of little pinholes. Or even like a previous kind of like buggered up flat tire change, where there's still some gravel or some debris in there.
All right.
Add the driven wheel in, and you've created a recipe for definitely a flat tire that's an annoyance beyond belief.
Okay, so we've got the Fluid Freeride Horizon, then we've got the Apollo Explorer, and then we've got, a choice to make between the Inokim, OXO or OX, and the Mantis. What is above the Mantis?
Yeah, so it's fairly interesting, and we just recently added a couple more to kind of supersede that. But the Wolf Warrior has always been a favorite, right, for a lot of people.
I love it.
Yeah,
I've got two of them.
And of course, I'm talking about the Wolf Warrior 11, which now I have to differentiate because of our new models. But that was a sweet spot of a 55 mile an hour scooter, which is a real muscle car of a scooter, but still within the realm of what I call usable power, right? You could pretty confidently, with some time on the scooter, gun it and just put a big old smile on your face and not really have to worry about the ramifications of your actions as much.
It's got like a motorcycle front end, so it's stable. Yeah, you feel confident. Yeah. The fastest I've ever got was 54. I wasn't trying to do it or anything, but I was at Red Rock Canyon.
Yes.
I was with Zero to Epic, the guy who crossed the United States on scooters. It was
him. I've seen that. That's really cool.
And I just happened to look down, and it was going 54 based on the speedo that comes on the Wolf Warrior, and I'm 185 pounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then so that model itself, that power is really fun. The chassis itself too, that kind of inverted fork triple tree suspension, the railing that kind of surrounds it. It also gives you a place to put your foot on the rear kind of deck. It makes it a lovely scooter for a lot of people who are not necessarily looking for the speed, but say in cities and whatnot or in rougher terrain, just need a solid day in, day out, I'm going to punish this commuter. Maybe, if we were calling the Horizon the Corolla, right?
Toyota Corolla, yeah.
That would be maybe more like the
Camaro or something?
Land Cruiser, probably.
Land Cruiser, yeah, you're right, yeah. Because, you have a choice between knobby off-road and street. My initial one was, I'm actually on my third one, but my initial one is knobby off-road, so you're right. It would be a Land Cruiser.
And, you can pick that experience. You can do it for some gentle to moderate off-roading, and plenty of people do it. The tire choice, or tire kind of change can turn it from a street racing machine to a off-road kind of devil. And building off of that kind of initial base of the Wolf Warrior 11, now we have the Wolf GT, the Wolf King GT, which those add some more of the features that people have been wanting. A nicer, kind of LCD display, wider handlebars. It actually, on the King GT, it has a little bit taller stack height. Now we have the controllers kind of out of the water spray, kind of water danger area, which is really nice. And with that extra room where the controllers used to occupy in that deck, a bigger battery. And then, the King GT has slightly more powerful controllers and motors than the Wolf GT. But those two models get into the kind of just... It's funny because there's the Mantis, right? There's the Wolf Warrior 11. And those just kind of go a tick above the Wolf Warrior 11 into definitely the more enthusiast and definitely high performance scooters.
Well, the GT just looks pimpin'.
Yeah.
I mean, I just love that gold color. It reminds me of Olin's.
Yeah, I think about it all the time when I see it. The steering dampener I used to have on my sport bike.
Yeah, it looks like if Olin's had made a scooter, that's what it would look like.
Time to scooter. Las Vegas. If I'm not wrong, that's Paul Somerville on saxophone. That was his band, The Conspiracy, from the Bay Area of California. Good stuff. Paul, of course, of the Electric Scooter Guide, who you can see in the video. He was a biggie on the technical side for Lime scooters. He has a long history with motorcycles and scooters, and apparently music. This is good stuff. Again, The Conspiracy with Paul Somerville of the Electric Scooter Guide. Time to scooter! So once again, as with last week, we are in Las Vegas at the Convention Center for the Consumer Electronics Show, CES. And we're speaking with Greg, the Chief Technical Officer for Fluid Freeride. Continuing our conversation with Greg of Fluid Freeride, we're talking about the Wolf King GT and talking about its performance and its looks.
Yeah, so one note with us at Fluid Freeride, though, is while we do carry the Wolf GT, the Wolf King GT, ours are actually black. We didn't stock the gold one.
My advice: stock it.
Yeah,
I love
it. It is pretty snazzy. I can't get away from that.
Although I've heard some people online in forums, and particularly in Australia and other places, saying that they would go for the murdered out black look. So it just depends what you like.
Yeah, we want to differentiate ourselves a bit with our models, as well as, in my personal opinion, I wanted to avoid any fit and finish kind of warranty quality issues with the gold finish over time, because while it is a durable finish and it's anodized, it is another thing, to possibly give us some grief in the future as the finish ages.
I just call that character. I have guitars and I have scooters. I have motorcycles as well. And I just call the character. It's like part of the life of it. In fact, I was going to bring one of my Wolf Warriors today, specifically because it is all beat up. The paint's nicked. You can see where I've mounted cameras and taken them off. I've added paint myself and that kind of thing. I just happen to enjoy patina
Absolutely.
or worn kind of look.
It does look cool too. It looks like definitely the gold finish I've seen in my opinion, when it does get faded or kind of sandblasted a bit from being off road. It looks sick, right? It looks like an off-road machine that just kind of came out of the desert. And
It's not a garage queen. Somebody's using it.
From a distributor standpoint or a manufacturer standpoint, say if it sun faded or such, it's another thing that we'll be culpable for a $4,500 unit. So we have to be mindful of that as well, and that was something that consideration we made in regards to that. But also to differentiate our Wolf GT from others.
And you also carry the Nami, which I'm excited to hear about because I keep seeing YouTube videos and mentions in the forum and that, but I haven't really followed up on it. What can you tell me about that? They don't have an off-road version though, do they? Is that really street or?
No, so it's funny because it's the first scooter pretty much with true adaptable suspension. Other ones have had preload, or they've had the semblance of kind of the same shock absorption systems we're used to seeing on bicycles. But this one actually uses a true, pretty standard 6.5-inch eye-to-eye shock absorber that has, at least for now, rebound adjustment and preload. And with that, you can adapt it over for kind of a varied amount of settings. And to answer your question, with a different set of tires, a different kind of suspension configuration, you have an off-road machine versus a pretty, with on-road tires and a little bit stouter suspension, a pretty neat and orderly on-road kind of like racer or, commuter.
Is there an option for knobby tires? Or that would be something aftermarket?
Not stock, because in my experience, usually you have to remove the fenders. Obviously, you have to remove the motors and put the off-road tires on. And it doesn't quite fit easily stock. But if you do, a couple changes, you can have a pretty fun little off-road machine.
I have heard that 80% of orders for the Wolf Warrior are for the street tire and not the knobby. Whereas I have both, and I'll tell you, I prefer the knobby. And even on the street, for a reason that you might not, well, you're a motorcyclist, so maybe you will appreciate the sound.
Yeah.
I like the way the knobby tires sound. They have a sound for one thing, and it alerts other riders that you're coming.
I can tell you the moment you mentioned it, I was thinking that I just love that it's almost like a jet engine kind of like whine, and it's one of my favorite things. And also, kind of riding on the street over varied terrain, glass and this and that, I have noticed it handles just dirt on the road a little bit better, right?
It does.
But, of course, for handling and for traction, those kind of slick or, treaded slick tires, well, that's an oxymoron, but
I know what you mean.
The treaded tires,
street tires.
The street tires. They're pretty. They're obviously the clear choice in that realm. But the knobby tires are fun, and actually, a lot of guys in New York kind of like the fully fleshed off-road looking Wolf, so they will go intentionally for the knobby tires, even knowing that the knobs, eventually do wear down, kind of being used on the street and whatnot.
Kind of like the soccer mom who owns a Range Rover to drop her kids off at school.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's it becomes like that. But it's a little bit fashion statement, and also some people just love the sound. It adds to the, a lot of people do like the quiet of the electronics and electronic vehicles. But having a little extra sound to give you that kind of
I don't like creeping up on, like, say there's a couple with their kids that are waiting for the light to turn green, and they're standing there and they're by the crosswalk. They don't hear me until I'm right on them, and they kind of jerk a little bit, like, what's that? With the knobby tires, they hear you coming 10, 15, 20 yards back, and they're not shocked like when you pull up next to them.
Yeah, actually, so I've had the privilege of riding some of the Zero motorcycles in Manhattan when I was back home, and I gotta admit, I scared the life out of a couple people passing on street corners on basically a full-fledged motorcycle, making zero noise. So a lot of guys back home, too, they'll rig up kind of auxiliary horn systems, or, we'll wire in more powerful horn systems, because you just need something kind of like a noisemaker to really help in those urban environments or close call environments.
I'm from Hawaii, and which, there's a lot of things great and wonderful about Hawaii, but one thing I'll tell you, you don't honk your horn at somebody. You might having some blala following you and want to punch you in the face when you pull over just because you honked at him. So one of my sport bikes, I have a Two Brothers Racing exhaust on there. It's full carbon fiber, which is great because when you stop, you can almost put your hand on it, and it's okay to the touch. But instead of a horn, I'll just blip my throttle, like that, and people, what? Oh, yeah, and it calls attention to you. So what you're saying, I totally agree with. It's a valid point.
That's actually a really interesting thing from the motorcycling community. Of course, everybody heard loud pipes save lives. And with cars, I don't think as much, but yeah, loud pipes let people know you're coming to an intersection or you're coming around a bend or something. It just lets people know there's something there.
Other people don't like it, and I get that.
Yeah.
I totally get it because it's noise pollution or whatever. But when you're on two wheels and going at high speed and doing maneuvering stuff, you want people in vehicles, whatever type of vehicle, to know, hey, there's a motorcycle around here. And as a driver, I want to know too, there's a motorcycle, somewhere near me, so I'll adapt my driving.
Yeah, even for me, like I've driven commercial vehicles, and obviously I just drive around. And the minute I hear kind of the rumble of a bike or sport bike, whatever, I kind of know. I'm just like, okay, I'm kind of looking at it, just give it a little extra time to those rear view mirrors. And, certainly stuff like that helps. Or even, maybe not in the noise spectrum, but with scooters, lighting, right? And, that's a continual thing. If I see anything that even looks like kind of curious in terms of lighting, I expect to see a bike or a scooter, especially in New York City, but all over the place. Like even when I was driving to Vegas, actually, to come to CES, there was a dude on the interstate riding, which I think is legal here, riding, I'm assuming, toward Vegas. And I caught the glimpse of his light, so, I moved over the lane, and sure enough, it was a gentleman on a bicycle. And it was getting, later in the day, but, stuff like that, just anything to catch the attention of other road users.
And that's an innovation I've seen in the newer scooters. Maybe you could name some of them. I can't think of off the top of my head. That the lighting is really improved. And some of them even have turn signals and rear brake lights. And that's huge. But I still think it's important to own a helmet that has some kind of light on it on the rear as well.
I've always been a big proponent. Some people think of it a little too kind of ungainly, but the more lights you can get on you, the better. And exactly what you're saying, I've been really happy to see the advancement of scooter lighting kind of, really get to that point of they're starting to fill in the gaps of the lighting where, it fills out the profile of a rider. The Apollo Phantom actually was one of the ones that was really applauded for having that pretty bright high mount light. The Explorer, while it doesn't have a high mount light, they do add that LED strip, which kind of at least draws the profile of a scooter. The Nami as well actually has a really nice headlight. It is one that kind of casts a beam very similar to a car, where it doesn't have that high beam kind of glare, and it cuts it right, kind of level, but it does illuminate almost a full field of view in the lane that you're in. And then the Wolf Warrior,
that's a great light.
It's a great light. It is. I think ESG tested it as one of the brightest lights on any scooter, and it is a mid-mount light, but I see a lot of guys gravitating toward it. For that lighting package that does definitely let people know there is some sort of road vehicle here. And, a lot of people in better lighting conditions are like, oh, that's a scooter. Let me give it a little
Although
more.
I think the horn on the Wolf is a little much. I have foam taped all over mine because some poor elderly lady on the street, when you just want to go ding ding with a little light and say, excuse me, ma'am, I'm gonna pass you, you hit them with that Wolf Warrior horn, and their wig flies 3 feet in the air.
I can tell you, as both showcasing scooters in our shop as well as servicing them and being the accumulator of tinnitus, I've been hit with that horn a little closer than I'd like to, than comfortable. Or inside of a building, it is fairly loud. It could do with sometimes we actually put bells on for people, just so they have like that auxiliary,
And that's the other thing, like you said, with the Apollo Explorer and other scooters that have a deficiency in factory-mounted lighting, is that you have a handlebar. You can choose the light of your preference, however bright or however you want it, and just mount it on there. And with lithium batteries, they last a fair amount of time, depending on how much night driving. I don't do that much night riding, so the ones that I mount, they seem to last forever.
Yeah, and that's actually funny enough. So whenever there's a gap in anything, of course, or a void, something comes to fill it. So what I've noticed is in this interim, while scooter lighting is still adapting to, where people want them placed and the brightness that people need, you've been seeing lighting systems that are LED pack based, right? Something you can strap on the stem of your scooter, add in some handlebar additions, and you can have a pretty darn bright lighting system. Or even a gentleman actually came to our booth earlier with this type of clip-on light, which I've seen for motorcycle helmets, where you can have it on the back of the helmet that has, turn signals, an auxiliary stop lamp, as well as, just another light on your pack, and stuff like that, where people are definitely being cognizant of how invisible they are on the road, because that truly is the experience of riding many bikes, scooters, and motorcycles on U.S. roads, at least, is that you're essentially invisible, right, to pedestrians, to car drivers. So people rely on those accessories, those externally mounted kind of battery pack lights or really powerful, kind of self-contained lights to, assist in augmenting the scooter's, lighting and your visibility, of course.
There he goes. Greg, the Chief Technical Officer for Fluid Freeride. What a great interview. I do have a couple side conversations that I might be tapping into later if you want to stick around for episode 57. In the future, we're also going to interview Oh Man Dan. That's right, Scootopia. So come on back, sit down, relax, put your feet up. Welcome to the Scooter Dome. Every Wednesday, we're here for you. Until then, keep the shiny side up and the dirt side down.